All right, ladies and gents, thanks for coming in. So, for this upcoming section, we'll be discussing H.P. Lovecraft and his Cthulhu mythos. And to do this, I'd like to introduce the concept of cosmic indifferentism. First, though, let's talk a little bit about horror. For Lovecraft, he considered many of the old-time monsters from folklore basically as cliches. Vampires, goblins, elves, sprites, fairies, imps, ghosts, pukas, banshees. The 20th century, none of these seem to possess the same capacity to horrify they once did. For Lovecraft, modernity seemed too different, too advanced for that. Because one of the things that really interested Lovecraft was science, particularly modern physics and astronomy. He felt those things had a lot to say about the universe that invalidated many of the beliefs common to the 19th century. Now, if you ever read Franz Kafka's fiction, you know that his writings are filled with the idea of human alienation. Alienation is this complete and surreal disconnect between you and your social environment. Whereas alienation in Kafka comes about through modern bureaucracy and irrationality, alienation in Lovecraft has a much grander scope. In particular, science in the 20th century, think about Einstein's theory of relativity, was quickly uncovering the vastness of the universe. And by comparison, it really made humanity seem small and inconsequential. We might care about ourselves a good deal, but ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, the universe, it doesn't. And that sort of realization, from a certain point of view, can be profoundly alienating. So that brings us to cosmic indifferentism, which is the philosophical and literary aesthetic that pervades all of Lovecraft's late horror fiction. Yes, I know in popular culture, what people tend to remember best about Lovecraft are his weird and excessively monstrous monsters. But for actual fans of Lovecraft, they usually argue that cosmic indifferentism is what gives his monsters their special impact. So, for a good definition of cosmic indifferentism, let's turn in particular to S.T. Joshi, one of the best-known scholars of Lovecraft around. For Joshi, cosmic indifferentism is the suggestion of the vast gulfs of space and time and the resultant inconsequence of the human species. Most of you, I bet, already have a glimmer of what Joshi is talking about here. If you ever looked up at the stars at night, it's easy to get lost in the sense of just how big the universe happens to be. And much as your friends and your family, they matter to you, or as much as you think it's important that you get married or graduate high school, as momentous as those events are, how much do they matter, really, when compared to that universe? Even if you did something truly wonderful, like winning the Nobel Peace Prize, that's fantastic. But 100 years from now, you're still just going to be a footnote in history books. 10,000 years from now, you won't even be that. And multiply that by a universe that already has billions and trillions of other planets in it, with life forms who knows. Compared to infinity, your entire existence is much less than one grain of sand on a beach. Whatever you do, that doesn't affect the universe one way or the other. The cosmos is utterly indifferent to your existence. That's cosmic indifferentism. So that attitude of humanity's infinitesimal smallness, which modern science seemed to support, it completely mesmerized Lovecraft. And he was a hardcore atheist, too. Just totally despised anything considered supernatural. So already, modern science was rapidly overturning all the old 19th century views on the physical universe. But even before that, you had astronomers like Galileo and Copernicus. They had proved already that the Earth wasn't the center of the solar system. The sun was, and that knocked humanity down a peg in the order of the cosmos. Christian theology, however, it still believed that human beings were created in God's image, and that God loved and cared about his creations. But as an atheist and a materialist, Lovecraft rejected that viewpoint entirely, and he had no patience for the notion of a kindly, benevolent deity watching lovingly over his creations. Just thought that was all nonsense. So this combination of ideas, modern science and atheistic materialism, led Lovecraft directly to his signature literary aesthetic, cosmic indifferentism, which you see best in the short horror tales about the Cthulhu mythos. Now, the word mythos, that obviously comes from the word myth, and Lovecraft gradually devised a fictive pseudo-mythology to give voice to all the dark and powerful entities populating the deepest depths of the universe. Now, he didn't actually believe in these things. Like I said, he rejected anything supernatural, but he thought it was an awesome premise for horror fiction. After all, what if, rather than a loving and caring God who watches over mankind, what if there existed certain godlike higher entities that were awful and malevolent all at once? Usually, luckily, humanity is beneath their notice. But sometimes, there are always those regressive elements in the human race, like dark cults and scholars of forbidden knowledge, who worship these entities and try to bring them back. And that's how Lovecraft came up with the Cthulhu mythos, this series of horrific little weird tales that contain all these incomprehensible alien beings who are, at best, indifferent to humanity's existence and, at worst, are actively hostile to it. But like I said, most of the time, the entities within the Cthulhu mythos, they don't pay much attention to people. But when they do, as in our short story, The Call of Cthulhu, that's when things get hairy. Overall, though, for the most part, people do get really fascinated by Lovecraft's writing, despite how famously purple his prose style can be. It's usually because of how beguiling they find his core aesthetic of cosmic indifferentism to be. For academics, too, Lovecraft has been incredibly useful for supporting philosophies that range from environmentalism to metaphysics. All told, in this fiction, there are these vast scopes of time and space on the outer edges of existence, and we occupy merely one tiny little speck of that. And the only thing that keeps us sane, that keeps us happy, that we have no idea the awful forces that are out there, capable of destroying us instantly if they wanted. The human mind has no protection against that knowledge, except ignorance. Good times.